Hello and welcome to UCL's Centre for Artificial Intelligence 15-minute Meet series, exploring all things AI. In today's interview, I'm joined by Peter Bentley, who is a visiting professor at Autodesk and an academic within UCL's AI Centre. Peter, thanks very much for taking the time to join us today.
Thanks for inviting me.
So we're starting our interviews by looking at the lockdown period. So perhaps you could tell me, how have you been finding lockdown? And what challenges and opportunities has this presented to the AI research community?
Well, let's see. I think challenges. I used to work at home to get away from the meetings, and now the meetings just kind of find you. So it's where do you go to work? Now, do you go to London to work? I don't know. So that's an issue. But I think for me, it's also created opportunities because, if you like, we've always, in recent times, thought of this as being a small world, and with everybody communicating via video, I think it makes it feel almost smaller. That I've been able to have nice conversations with researchers all around the world, and I think in many respects it's perhaps given us a bit of time to reflect. At least those of us without kids.
Makes sense. And we're also looking in these interviews at the academic career journeys that our participants have had to date. So perhaps you could give us a bit of background on your own career journey.
Okay, I've had a really unconventional career. I sometimes think a career is too grandiose a word for what I've my weird travels through whatever I've chosen to do. So I've always been a natural researcher. So my father's an engineer. I was building robots from 8 or 9. My whole child, I was a geek. My childhood was making stuff, programming computers. I grew up in the early home computer boom with the BBC Micro and the ZX80 and ZX81. So my childhood was doing that. It was very natural for me to I did a degree in artificial intelligence and then go on and do a PhD and go straight into research. So my first postdoc, which was when I was 25, and that's when I joined UCL. So I worked with Philip Treleaven, and I did a fraud detection project with genetic algorithms and fuzzy logic, and that was with SearchSpace, which was one of UCL's earlier spin-off AI companies, which was very successful. And then I took a kind of right-hand turn, and all the professors were saying, "Oh, Peter, you should take a lectureship. We're starting this new course in evolutionary computing." But I'd been doing some media work. I'd done a book. I'd actually helped a BBC producer with a documentary. And I had this idea, wouldn't it be nice if a computer scientist wrote a popular science book for a change? So I wrote a bit of it and discovered they really, really liked it. And I ended up, I chatted to our local famous folk in UCL who recommended I get a literary agent, so I did. And I ended up with this choice. Do I become an author or do I become a lecturer? Because it would be very hard for me to sort of have a career as an author and be a new lecturer and design a course and do all the admin. So I became an author. Much to the dismay of many people at UCL, I continued at UCL as an honorary researcher and actually continued doing research and ended up for many, many years, for the next 20 years, honorary. First I was an honorary RA, then honorary senior RA, then honorary reader, and now I'm an honorary professor. And all through that time, I made a living through writing popular science books, which I think most people in academia have no idea. That's how I was actually earning money. And I funded all my students and RAs through collaborations with industry. That's why I have a very unconventional career, that I've done a lot of collaborations with industry. I've been able to have the freedom to do a lot of unusual research projects without the kind of admin overhead that many academics face today. I mean, that's not to say it's easy. I mean, you know, it's not always. I was effectively self-employed, and that's always, you know, makes life interesting. But that's what I did. And at times I was a consultant, and then more recently I became a CTO of an AI company. And most recently of all, I'm a visiting professor for Autodesk. But as I say, yeah, I don't know if that counts as a career, does it?
Well, it sounds very exciting, and we'll come back to Autodesk and your some of your books shortly. But one of the things that was very interesting was on your website, you state that biology is your greatest inspiration. I was wondering if you could elaborate on how this has inspired your research career in computer science.
Well, okay, so I began looking at genetic algorithms and evolutionary computation, and my PhD back in the early 90s was evolving designs. And I found it fascinating how nature, through the process of natural evolution, has created the diversity and complexity of life. But at the same time, I'm a computer scientist. And so for me, let's say I understand things through computation. And whilst conventionally you might think, okay, the brain is an amazing natural computer, that's the tip of the iceberg, really. If you think about all the complex forms of, as I would phrase it, information processing that goes on in nature, I mean, the process of evolution itself is like a search process that's searching through all the possible combinations of DNA and RNA and proteins to form different kinds of living creatures, using the building blocks of life in many different and bizarre and creative ways, as we might like to anthropomorphize. But you know, evolution has inspired me a lot. The process of development, so going from a single cell organism to the complex creatures that we are, this growth process, embryogenesis, that in itself is a kind of computation. It takes a very small amount of information and somehow turns it into something hugely complex through interactions with an environment. Our immune systems are another form of amazing computation, and they're kind of an anomaly detector. They detect things that have never existed before. You know, these new viruses, and unfortunately we're facing one at the moment, has never existed before on this planet, and yet at least some of us are able to become immune to it. And this is a marvel of technology. It's biology. It's biological technology. And I like to say that the technology of nature is billions of years, literally billions of years beyond ours. I mean, you know, even a little fly is a self-replicating, fully autonomous little thing that can keep itself sustained from its environment. It builds itself, it designs itself, you know, way beyond anything we can do. So I find this inspiring, and my as a computer scientist, my question is, well, how does that work then? And can we learn any tricks to apply for in our technology? And what might those tricks be? I mean, some of them are quite fundamental, like how is information even stored in living systems? Because it's not as simple as there's a gene, as we've discovered. That, you know, living systems somehow use morphology in a different way. Everything is about the shape of stuff, the shape of this protein fitting this molecule, or the shape of different atoms coming together. And you know, biology is using this down to quantum levels, and yet affects everything up to massive, macro scales. I mean, the Earth is entirely shaped by living organisms. So, for me, this is extraordinary, and how we can learn from some of these things. And of course, AI is filled with examples of us learning from nature. Deep learning is only successful, one could argue, because of some of the tricks we've learned from studying how the brain works. And indeed, many scientists are continuing to this day to learn more of these tricks.
Thank you, Peter. That was fascinating. And just returning to the present day, so you're currently a visiting professor at Autodesk. Maybe you could tell us a bit more about Autodesk as a company and your position there.
Sure. So actually, we have some nice links. UCL has some nice links with Autodesk. So one of my students, Siavash Madhavi, created a company, Complex Matters, which was also within technologies at one point too. And this was a design consultancy that used optimization and other clever tricks to optimize the internal microstructure of 3D printed or that kind of technology. This company was acquired by Autodesk, and so not only was one of our PhD students made quite wealthy as a result, and Siavash has gone on and helped fund many AI startups in London since, but several of the employees who were also my students and other UCL graduates are now employed by Autodesk. So most recently, one of them, who's called Human Shayani, he is now becoming the manager of the London-based AI lab. And they've asked me to help them set this lab up and sort of help link Autodesk research with academia, both at UCL and in more general. So my role is to do that, is to hopefully give them the benefit of some of my years of experience in research, and help them grow. They're very, very keen. So Autodesk Research is comprises of several labs, not just AI. They also look into robotics, sort of engineering, architecture, and Autodesk as a company, well, hopefully many of you know Autodesk already, but Autodesk is one of the world's oldest computer-aided design companies. It originated in the early 80s, and it today has more than 100 different products, many of which are not just used by designers in industry, but also it has products that are used for making a lot of the special effects that you see in movies and TV today. So if it's about design and graphics and manufacturing, then Autodesk is one of the premier players. So obviously AI is today forming a really important part of what they do. And generative design, which came out of the company that my student created, is forming quite a key part of what they do as well. So it's really nice for me, actually, personally, because my PhD 25 years ago was pretty much in generative design, and now it's almost gone full circle. I've seen it go into industry, and now I'm helping them, and I'm helping the fresh researchers in this area. So it's actually very nice for me to see the success of this kind of area.
Thanks, Peter. Now, as we noted earlier in the interview, you're very active in the space of science public engagement. And we can see a number of examples of your books behind you, but the latest of which is your 10 short lessons in artificial intelligence and robotics, which I believe is out this month. Maybe you could tell us a bit more about this project, and could you give us a sneak peek at one of the lessons that you cover?
Oh, I don't know if I can do that or not. The book is actually aimed at the non-specialist. So if you know someone who wants to understand a little bit about what AI is and what robotics really comprises today, then that's what the book is aimed for. It's a short book. The lessons are intended to be overviews, and AI is way too big to fit into one book, especially a kind of easy to read. So as to different lessons, I don't know that I can pick out a specific one, but I do talk about a lot of the different areas, from emotional AI, so AI that can understand how we feel, to communication and things such as speech recognition and natural language processing. Of course, I go into deep learning and vision and different kinds of neural networks, and also things like search optimization, genetic algorithms. So as to different lessons, I don't know. But probably the most important thing I would say as a lesson is, don't overhype AI, please. AI is just another technology. It's a really clever technology, but for me, because I've written several books where I've been privileged enough to interview many of the pioneers in computer science, and it's pretty clear that the more people hype these technologies about how it's going to be amazing and how people are going to lose their jobs and how tomorrow we're going to have driverless cars, and people then get a bit let down when it takes a little bit longer than the prediction state. And the result is the funding all dries up because the investors feel let down, and we end up in an AI winter. And this has happened a couple of times already. So we don't want that again. We're very happy right now that AI is so fashionable. So, it's working well, great. But let's not overhype it. Every technology, every kind of algorithm has limitations. It's going to be great at some things. It's not going to be suitable for everything. And that's why we keep doing research. We keep trying to understand, why is it good at this? Why is it not so good at that? Is there a different approach that might be better at this kind of problem? It's going to be a long journey. So let's not overdo the predictions. Let's just accept that intelligence took more than 3.5 billion years to arise on Earth. And that's with a lot of testing. Imagine all the species, all the different creatures alive simultaneously, effectively being tested in different environments. That's how long it takes. So, we don't have the computation power yet. We don't understand intelligence enough yet. We've still got a lot of work to do.
Peter, it was fascinating to talk to you today. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. We could go on talking indefinitely about some of these topics. Thank you very much for being on the 15-Minute Meets interview series, and hopefully we can catch up with you again at some point in the future.
My pleasure.